I was sitting in a small park in Manhattan today with my boyfriend, the AIDS Memorial Park down on St. Vincent's Triangle. We were sitting on a bench, and across from the bench was grass. There were tons of people there today because the weather was perfect. Amongst the people on the grass was a woman in her late 20s with a ridiculously cute Pomeranian and 3 kids. These kids looked to be around 5 years old, and they all looked very similar, so I believe they might have been triplets. They were running around wild, nobody seemed to be watching them. I was watching them at first because I was sure they were going to accidentally trip on someone or bump into someone on the crowded lawn. But things became bad, and I ended up watching them because I feared for their lives. They walked up to the woman with the Pomeranian and asked her if they could pet her dog. She said sure, and they began playing with the dog. It was fine, but then they overdid it, as children often do, and began trying to pick up the dog, despite the woman asking them not to. At this time, a man in his 40s with a beard sat down next to her and removed his shoes. That's New York for you. I figured it'd just be a strange but quiet person, nothing out of the ordinary. Then he said something to the woman that I couldn't hear. She seemed to be ignoring him, although he repeatedly tried to talk to her. Eventually overwhelmed by the man and the children, she left. The kids remained unsupervised and continued running around until the man suddenly began to talk to them. He was offering them food, and then, finally, their nanny noticed them. This is after about 30 minutes of them running entirely unsupervised, harassing other people. She told them to come to her, and then she said not to accept food from anyone. Then she let them play again and went back to her cell phone and completely ignoring them. They went back to the man eventually, and this guy starts asking them if they want to go with him to a playground nearby. The nanny is completely oblivious to this, and I start panicking. I'm a 4'10", 100-pound girl, and I know I can't get into any sort of altercation with this guy. And I also know I can't just sit by and do nothing. Luckily, before I had the time to decide what to do, a muscular man who had been sitting beside them for a while reacted. He told the kids that they should go back to their nanny, and when they ran off, he said, "I think you need to leave," to the older man. The old man began screaming, "I didn't ask them for sex," and some profanities at the muscular guy, and the muscular guy decided to leave, obviously not wanting to get into a fight. As he was leaving, the man screamed, "Go back to your country!" The muscular guy happened to be Hispanic. The muscular guy turned around to go back to the guy, but bystanders just yelled, "He's not worth it!" At this point, now the guy has everyone's attention. Other people sitting near him are all talking about what he said, and some more people tell him he should leave. A teen boy who seemed to be babysitting a kid around the triplets' age had his kid play with them so that he could keep an eye on them all. Finally, the guy realized that shit was not going to go well for him, and he put his shoes back on and left. So child-luring man, let's not meet. And nanny who paid zero attention to the children about to be kidnapped, I hope I meet the parents who hired you. This happened a few hours ago, and upon waking up and thinking about it, I realized that I most likely just scared the crap out of some poor old man. To start, though, you have to understand the situation I recently found myself in. My beloved cat, we'll call him Billy, went missing about 2 weeks ago. I plastered my neighborhood in posters, begging for anyone who sees him to contact me. Today, after weeks of silence, I got a call from a woman claiming to have spotted Billy by the graveyard behind my house. So naturally, I got dressed and headed out to search for him. But again, some background information is needed. This weekend I came down with an awful cold. I've been sick for days and my nose has gotten so dry. Sometimes it just pours blood. My hair is matted and my voice currently sounds like a transgendered Shirley Temple. My fever has me constantly drenched in sweat, so overall, I'm a mess. After walking the perimeter of the graveyard and neighborhood, I decided to walk through the graveyard and search for him in there. So I strolled in, calling, "Billy!" over and over again. As I got deeper into the cemetery, I came across a car. It seemed to be some old man who was dropping off flowers for someone. I just kept walking and calling out for my missing cat. As I got closer to the man, I noticed he was staring at me and backing away. I found his behavior kind of strange, but being sick, exhausted, and solely focused on finding my cat, I ignored it and just kept walking. As soon as I was past him, though, I heard a car door slam, and by the time I turned around to see if he was okay, he was speeding out of the cemetery. I finished my walk, went home, and fell asleep. It was only upon waking up that I realized how creepy that must have been for the old man. He was dropping off flowers in a secluded graveyard in the middle of the afternoon when some girl, drenched in sweat and with matted hair and blood dripping out of her nose, starts to come towards him yelling, "Billy! Come on, Billy!" over and over again, with a voice so deep she sounds like a demon. So the man I creeped out in the graveyard today, let's meet sometime so I can try to explain what just happened. Updates. A few more hours have passed, and I just got news. Billy was found dead. Hey Reddit, let's not meet. I've been a big fan of this sub for years. For some reason I never realized I had a story to tell too, until a question on Ask Reddit reminded me about something from my past that I think you might find interesting. Apologies if this is long. So this was winter 2007 through 2008 in mid-Missouri. I don't remember what the month was, but there was just a little snow on the ground behind the bushes I ended up hiding in, so it was definitely winterish. It was pitch black outside, so it was probably a new moon. Maybe someone can chart that. I lived with my mom and dad in a 3-story house at the time. The first story, or 0 story as my dad called it, being a finished basement that I essentially lived in and almost never emerged from except to sleep in my room on the 3rd floor. I was always either in the basement or on the 3rd floor, and putting it lightly, I'm really glad I wasn't on the 3rd floor when this story went down. My dad was out of town on some kind of business trip. He's a doctor, so I'm honestly not sure what kind of trip it could have been. It's hazy, but that doesn't matter. The main thing is my mom and I were alone in the house, which was extremely rare. I was also a teenager and thus a smartass, so I convinced her to watch what was at the time my favorite movie. My favorite movie was Saw 3, and my mom, God bless her, is a tiny and often timid woman, though very strong and powerful when it counts. I'm not knocking her. So I knew we'd probably start watching in good sport, but abort the mission before long and make me turn it off. Still, I thought it'd be fun or funny or something. I was a dumb kiddo. Y'all know how it is. So of course I want to watch the movie in the basement instead of the living room. Not just because it was my habitat, but as I told her, a good horror movie deserves a basement. Again, I was a dumb kiddo, or maybe not so dumb in this case. The only way into our basement was behind a pretty hefty door just off a wall from the living room on the 1st floor. Basically, if you walked into the house, you normally wouldn't notice there was a basement door at all because it was off to one side. I say normally because in this case there were a lot of saw noises coming from that door. So my mom is performing admirably, really above and beyond the Call of Duty, because we're in the middle of the scene where Carrie is strung up and has to dig for a key in a vat of acid. I'm feeling so proud that my mom is staying still for this, but in retrospect, thank Christ she didn't give up and run off. Maybe she was about to, I don't know. But she stayed, until it became time for us to leave. Right when Carrie started fishing in the tank of acid, keep in mind this is a very loud movie, screaming and all that, I think I hear the door upstairs slam. I think, nah, that's ridiculous. But a half second later, I realize there are footsteps above us, and my dad is in another state. Somehow I don't panic, but I probably waited a little too long trying to listen. At the time, I thought I heard 3 people, but footsteps are hard to judge. They just kind of marched around from what I heard. But what I heard was very short, because as soon as I realized what was going on, I told my mom we had to get out. The basement had a back door, with lighting on the outside wall, unfortunately. I was concerned about the lights when we were leaving. I remember being worried whoever was upstairs might be able to see us when we ran out. But I decided not to turn the light off, thinking it'd be more obvious if that side of the house went dark when we ran out than if we just scampered with the light on. It was around 11 p.m., I think, so total dark except for the lights in the basement and on the back wall of the house. The house next to us was empty, for sale, and the house on the opposite side couldn't have seen anything because it was up on a hill. Point being, I got my mom and convinced her to run out into the dark and hide behind some bushes. But there was no one around to help us immediately. I called 911 the second we got behind the bushes alongside the house, but I remember I went silent on the operator right before I could give her our address, and she was saying something repeatedly while I had the phone down trying to pretend I wasn't there. I noticed the light around the basement exit get brighter, like someone had opened the door, because someone had opened the door. And to the best of my ability, I counted 4 shadows absolutely tear out of the basement at top speed into the woods behind the house. As I told the cops when they got there, very rapidly and in full force, kudos to our town's police, I thought I saw 4, but they rushed out so fast there could have been 1 or 2 more, or maybe 1 less. This has been a long story, so I'll get to the TLDR bullet points of what happened, or might have happened that night. The front door lock was all jacked up like it had been pried somehow, because it absolutely had been pried. I always locked that door, even when my dad was actually home, so that was point 1. Point 2, while the front door had been closed after they came in, the back door of the basement had been left wide open, and our 2 dogs and 2 cats were outside when the cops got there. They were all inside pets who never ever got outside, so the second I saw my dog run up to me, I knew I hadn't been imagining things. Point 3, and this is where I have to start filling in some of the blanks because I don't know everything. These people, 3 or 4 or however many, broke in through our front door. I heard them and managed to get the hell out while they stomped around upstairs. Point 4, I'm in the bushes with my mom, maybe a minute later, and I see shadows race out the back basement door into the woods. I count 4, but I'm scared so I can't be sure. Point 5, nothing in the house was misplaced or stolen or vaguely disturbed, even though there were expensive electronics in both the living room they entered into and the basement they ended up in. Point 6, and this is the important one, which the police, as much as I respected them, didn't seem to understand and thought I was being hysterical about. These people broke in the front door. We blitzed out the back door, but as I said, the stairs to the basement were not at all obvious. More to the point, if they were burglars, why would you care to find the basement when there was so much to loot in the living room? In my estimation, they sought out the basement more than they sought out anything to steal. There's no explanation for how it all went down and how fast it all went down, other than this. Putting all those points together, a group of people broke through my front door, stomped around a little, paused to listen for the sound of people, heard the noisy movie with screams downstairs, followed the sound to the door downstairs in search of the residents, surged down the stairs really fast, surveyed the big basement room, and saw a horror movie playing with no one around, and then surged out the back door. So what were they looking for? Burglars don't go looking for people, they avoid them. So what happened at my house that night? The cops never searched the woods behind our house, but they did put a cruiser in front of our house for 2 nights, which was nice of them. The morning after it happened, not having slept, I decided I wanted to watch The Strangers as some way of coping. I was a weird kid. Anyway, freaky people, thrill seekers, I'm not sure what to call you. I've been dancing around this because I've never admitted this fact out loud or in specific words online. But I think you probably came to my house that night with physically violent goals. You zeroed in on the sound of humans, and when you found none of us around, you left, because you'd lost what you came for. I only had a few seconds to act. I try not to wonder what you would have done if you'd found my mom and me in that basement, but it comes up time and time in my mind. So, possible thrill seekers, whatever your thrills may have been, I've seen so many people here say this, but never thought I had a good reason to say it myself until now. Let's seriously not meet.